In this video, we're going to look at the types of interaction available in any course and how being aware of these from the start and thinking about them can inform your online or hybrid course design. We'll start with the three main components of every course, and these are broad enough that they do apply to every course regardless of discipline. Every course has students, an instructor, and the course content. So the material that students need to learn, whatever it is that your subject matter is, whatever it is that you need to do to meet those student learning outcomes, this is the topic of your course, what students will be learning. These three components don't exist on their own, of course, and it's the interaction between them that we're going to look at and think about how that can inform our online or hybrid course design. Let's talk about these types of interactions in a traditional face-to-face learning environment, and then I'll give you some examples of how this could apply to your online and hybrid course design decisions. We'll start with our students at the center of this model for interaction. So the first type of interaction is student to student. In a face-to-face classroom, this can happen in a structured way, so students working in small groups or responding to each other in a discussion. It can also happen casually and socially, so students talking with one another at the beginning of class or meeting up with one another to study outside of class. So that's the student to student interaction in a course. Next, we have student to instructor interaction. So in a face-to-face class, this is the instructor asking students questions, facilitating discussions, lecturing, and also meeting with students one-on-one, whether that's in office hours, responding to emails. So lots and lots of ways that students and instructors interact with one another. And then, of course, there's students to the course content or the course materials. So that's students reading their textbooks, watching the videos that are provided, doing problem sets, whatever it is where the students are interacting with the content of the course. And if we look at all three of these, which are of course very closely related, this really makes up the fundamentals of every structured learning experience. I think examples can be a great way to look at how these types of interactions can inform your choices when you're designing your online or hybrid class. We'll start with student-to-student interactions. So thinking about ways that in the very DNA of your course design, you're providing opportunities for students to interact with one another. These could be low stakes. You could have an ungraded discussion forum where you encourage students to ask each other questions or to socialize in a way that's appropriate for the course context. You might think about having discussion forums as part of your course requirements. So these are a great way to serve as the attendance feature of your course. And I encourage you in your rubric for your discussion forum to require that students respond to classmates in their responses. That's a great way to get engagement going, but often if it's not required, it won't happen on its own. So you really want to facilitate that. You can think about requiring peer review as formative assessment. So if students are working on projects or papers or anything where they could be giving each other feedback, you could allow them to share their work in progress with each other and provide feedback on that work. You might think about establishing together with your students some community standards for communication in the class. So you could have standards. So for example, something to the effect of writing in all caps is considered shouting. So please be respectful in your communication choices with your classmates. You could have a netiquette document, and I think it's really nice to involve students in this. If students are involved in the establishment of these norms and standards for communication, they're much more likely to feel invested in them and to follow them and to hold each other accountable. You could have group work, so you could have small group discussions, you could have group projects. And just thinking about ways to ask students to work with each other in smaller groups so they have that chance for smaller interaction, because we know how important it is to feel connected to others in an online learning environment. And finally, you could think about helping students to create their own study groups. They could do this via Zoom. They could set up their own Zoom accounts, or you could create a Zoom room for them to meet in. And if you're having a class session, you could also use breakout rooms in Zoom to allow students to have a smaller, more intimate conversation with one another. Moving on to student-instructor interactions. So there's private communication, which is pretty obvious. Emails that you exchange with students, the feedback that you give to them in assignments, because of course students can only see their own assignment and can only see the feedback that you give directly to them. Those are all private communication channels that you have with your students in an online course. There's also the quote public interactions, and of course I mean public within the course itself. So this is, for an example, when an instructor responds to a student's post in a discussion forum, or when an instructor is participating in the discussion forum, all students can see that. And so that can be a great way to clarify misconceptions or ask follow-up questions, and that sort of public interaction, but that's often going from an instructor to an individual student in that quote-unquote public space, is really, really important for online courses. The choices that you make about your course, so the images that you choose to use, the fundamental sort of navigation and layout changes, those are all important ways to show who you are and show the way that your course functions. And of course, you should be creating those getting started materials so that you are directly telling your students how to navigate your course and how to be successful in that course. You could think about creating a course tour video where you walk students through the course and give them tips on how to be successful in that environment. Formative feedback on assignments is really, really crucial. So this is maybe if students have a major project that you're breaking it down into components, and that there's some opportunity for you to provide feedback on an early draft before students make choices or maybe sort of go off in the wrong direction, and you're able to provide that feedback and help them make changes while they still have the opportunity before they turn in their final assignment. Summative feedback, of course, is an important student to instructor interaction. So that's the feedback that you give on assignments and also the grades that you provide to students and how you're showing them where those grades come from. So hopefully providing grading guides or a rubric and showing them how you've evaluated their work. And finally, we have student to content interactions. I think the most important decision that you can make are around your student learning outcomes and how you're communicating these to students, aligning your course content and assessments with them, and showing students how these inform the overall course design and all content that they're going to interact with. The other really, really important fundamental decisions you'll be making is just how your course looks. How do students navigate it? What is the layout? What type of Moodle course format are you going to use? So the overall course design and organization, it really, really intersects with course content in the online space, because the Moodle course becomes the student's virtual classroom. It becomes the place where their course materials are organized, where they come to get links to videos and readings. So it's very, very important that you really think about how you want to organize that online space for your students. Of course, the materials that you choose, so the textbook or extra readings, links to websites, videos, or publisher content is extremely important when it comes to student to content interaction, because we all know that in online environments, students are being asked to do more independent learning when it comes to processing that content. And of course, you should always give them a lot of opportunities to demonstrate their understanding or practice their understanding of the content and ask you questions, ask each other questions. But the materials themselves and how you choose them and how you choose to display them to students are really important with that interaction. You will most likely be creating some of your own content. So creating a video lecture, such as this one, a tutorial, a screencast. You might walk students through how to solve a problem or how to think about a certain concept in the course. And that's another way that you'll have that student to content interaction. That's instructor created content. Your course assessments, so how you write your quiz questions and how you present assignment instructions to students are all part of that student to course content interaction. And then finally, thinking about what kind of real world application you can integrate into the online course, as this is really important for students to be able to understand how to take that course content that they're learning and apply it to the real world. I want to end with 3 guiding questions for you to be thinking about how these types of interactions can influence your online or hybrid course design decisions. So how are students interacting with each other in your course? This is that student-to-student interaction piece. And how are you going to structure these opportunities and include them in your overall course design? How are students going to interact with you? So what does that student-instructor interaction look like? How are you communicating your expectations that you have for students? And then how do you let students know what they can expect from you? So that could be anything from letting them know a time frame within which you'll respond to emails, to talking about some fundamental expectations for course communication. And finally, how are students interacting with the course content? How are you structuring those learning experiences so that when you're presenting content to students, when you're having them do a reading or watch a video, how are you then giving them a follow-up activity that will help them to process and reflect on and demonstrate their understanding of that content? A well-designed online or hybrid course will have these 3 types of interactions present in every decision that you make. So as you're thinking about your course and how you'll build it in Moodle, think about how are students interacting with each other, how are students interacting with me, the instructor, and how are students interacting with course content. And if any of those elements is missing, you want to think about how to incorporate that, because it's really having all 3 types of interaction present that's going to create that sense of connection and in community and engagement for your students. So think about all 3 and how those interact with your fundamental course decisions. As always, if you have any questions or you want to talk more about this, send us an email at moodlehelp@berkshirecc.edu. Thanks for watching.